Our News from the Hill segment tonight. Is President Trump done with congressional Republicans? That's what some are saying after Trump struck deals with Democrats Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. So is the Trump we knew gone? Or is this an elaborate game of 3D chess like some are claiming? And either way, what does that mean for the congressional Republicans he turned his back on? With me now, Congressman from Florida's 1st District, Representative Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thanks for being on the show.
Great to be on.
All right, Congressman, weigh in on this for me. President Trump met with Democrats instead of Republicans to talk about DACA last week. What do you make of that?
Well, I understand President Trump's frustration with Senate Republicans. I think House Republicans get a raw deal in this. We've passed most of the president's agenda. We've passed wall funding, crackdowns on sanctuary cities, a repeal of Dodd-Frank, a repeal of Obamacare. We expect our tax reform bill to be on the floor in several weeks. And so it's really the United States Senate where Republicans have not been able to manage that chamber. What I know of the president from our days in Florida is that he respects people who can impact outcomes, who can make things happen. And right now, he may see that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi can make things happen, and that's something that he wants to explore further. My objective is to ensure that we have conservative public policy that the president campaigned on, and I think we'll be able to get there, but we're certainly going to need more activity, more action, and really results from Senate Republicans who've been sitting on their hands for a large part of the president's term.
Right, and I think in plain English that means we need some leadership from Senator Mitch McConnell here to get some of these conservative agenda items onto the floor to get some of this stuff done. Congressman, let me address the elephant in the room here. You were one of the few who voted against the hurricane relief bill in Florida. Your district is in Florida, the 1st District in Florida. You voted against it when it was attached to the debt ceiling. Do you stand by that vote?
I absolutely do. I voted for hurricane relief when it was simply a question about hurricane relief, but Mitch McConnell and some of the rest of the swamp creatures over in the United States Senate tacked on to the hurricane relief provisions of this legislation $1 trillion in spending under a new debt limit. And so only in Washington do you have about $100 billion in actual need result in $1 trillion in new spending. In Washington, too many of the politicians are addicted to spending. And when someone's an addict, they'll do anything to justify their behavior. And so here, unfortunately, hurricane victims were lashed to the desire of Washington politicians to spend another $1 trillion. And I certainly think history will not judge favorably those who sat here and did nothing while generational theft continued to sweep our country.
Right, and I commend your courage. I actually think you did the right thing there, and I love that phrase, generational theft, because what they're doing, what Democrats are doing, and I guess Republicans too who voted for this bill, it's understandable from a compassionate sense, but what they're doing is they're stealing from our children and our children's children. They're saddling them with debt they're never going to be able to pay off, and we're going to end up owing it to other countries, which of course puts us at economic risk. Congressman, let me go back to something you said before. You were talking about in just a couple weeks, you expect tax reform to be on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. What might this look like? President Trump has been talking about this, talking about massive tax cuts. What are you guys working on in detail here?
Well, the president's focus is on middle-class families. He doesn't want to see this tax bill function as a big giveaway to corporate America or a windfall to the wealthiest Americans. He wants to make sure that regular folks who are trying to follow the rules and get ahead in life have a simple, fair tax code that works for them. And so we're going to collapse the number of tax brackets down into 3. I suspect that clarity will create a dynamic pro-growth atmosphere. And I think that where there are circumstances where some lawyer or lobbyist has gotten a special interest giveaway for someone in Washington, we ought to really scrutinize that, and we ought to evaluate whether or not our tax code is really working for the American people. The regular folks in my district, they don't need a 2,000-page tax code. They just need to know how to follow the rules and how to get ahead. It's the special interests that need a complicated tax code, and so simple will be the organizing principle of our reforms, and I think that will be in line with the president's commitment to really get this economy growing so that we can meet the needs of this great country.
And listen, just as one of the American people, one of the general public, I beseech you, please make it easy enough for us to fill out our taxes on just a postcard, that we don't have to pay other people. We don't have to look up a million rules and get confused and stressed out every April. We would all greatly appreciate that. Congressman, last question here. This is about President Trump's speech yesterday in front of the United Nations, a bold speech, very bold, talking about about North Korea. Now, I know that you're involved with the Armed Services Committee. What do you make of President Trump calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and saying that if he does not stop, if he does not immediately cease his nuclear activity, the United States will totally destroy the North Korean regime?
It is so refreshing to have a president of the United States who actually goes to the UN to fight for our country and not the interests of some of these globalist institutions. In my opinion, the UN is a swamp in and of itself, and the president's speech there was sort of the UN version of draining the swamp. And why I'm so proud of the president is he really reinstituted the theory that it is the country, the nation state, that is the organizing driver of foreign policy and not some globalist institution. So I'm glad he spoke with that clarity, but the American people need to realize we may be on the brink of war with North Korea. We need to immediately increase our activity with South Korea. We need to accelerate some of the basing decisions we're making in Japan. And most importantly, we need to deploy more missile defense systems in the Asian theater. If we did that, I think we'd get China's attention with a great deal more success. And China has the power to push North Korea to the right outcome. Remember, 90% of the North Korean economy flows through China. And so by advancing our decisions on missile defense in Asia, I think we can do a lot more to get China's attention. For too long, we've been relying on diplomatic activity and sanctions. And for a generation, that just hasn't worked in North Korea because so much of their economy is illicit. It's not legal, and you can't sanction that which is already illegal and driving the North Korean nuclear program.
Right, and we'll look at where it's gotten us. It's gotten us to the point that Kim Jong-un is firing off these missile tests over Japan in a threatening manner, almost on a weekly basis now. And to quote a former president, we gave diplomacy a try, and I think it's time to ramp up the game. Sounds like President Trump is doing just that. Congressman Gaetz, thanks for being on the show, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.